You know those moments when you start reading something, and within a few pages you realize, this is not your usual kind of book? It's unsettling, it's confusing, but in a strangely addictive way. Like sipping a cup of coffee that's too bitter, yet you keep drinking because you kind of like the bitterness. That's how I felt reading this one. My first encounter with a Nobel Prize winner, and I wasn't disappointed. This book had me traveling from the psychological chaos of the Vietnam War to the heart of colonial Africa. Two stories that couldn't be more different, yet somehow speak to each other like reflections on the same cracked mirror. One is about a man losing his mind, the other about a man losing his soul. Both in their own way are battles of conscience, and both end badly. Let's start at the beginning with a man named Eugene Dawn. Eugene Dawn is a psychologist during the Vietnam War, smart, driven, and just a little too serious about his job. His work? To develop a psychological war strategy, the kind that could win hearts and minds, or at least manipulate them. You could say he's the kind of guy who believes that propaganda is just a fancy word for persuasion. He's not a soldier. He doesn't carry a gun. His weapon is language, and he's armed to the teeth with it. He spends his days crafting essays, reports, and psychological frameworks designed to outwit the enemy. You know, the usual how to win a war without leaving your desk kind of genius. But there's a problem. His boss, also named Coetzee, tells him to revise his work. And that's where Eugene starts to unravel. Instead of simply editing his report, he turns the critique inward. He starts analyzing himself. And that's never a good idea when your job is to manipulate minds. You might just end up manipulating your own. The pressure mounts, the lines between work and identity blur, and slowly Eugene begins to crumble. It's like watching a sandcastle dissolve under the tide. What begins as a confident professional project turns into a psychological breakdown. He obsesses over his failure. He second-guesses his purpose. And then, he snaps. It's a quiet kind of madness, not the dramatic movie-type insanity, but a slow, creeping one that feels all too real. Coetzee, the author, captures that descent so vividly that you start wondering, wait, is this fiction? Or am I reading an actual case study? That's part of the genius of this first story. It feels so real. It's almost uncomfortable. Through Eugene Dawn, we see that not all casualties of war die on the battlefield. Some die sitting behind a desk, their minds collapsing under the weight of moral contradictions. Coetzee shows us that war doesn't just destroy bodies, it also corrodes souls. And that's just the first story. Now, the second one, that's where things get really dark. We move from 20th century America to 18th century Africa. A completely different time. A completely different madness. This story follows a man named Jacobus Coetzee, not related to the author or to the first Coetzee, though you can't help but notice the irony. Jacobus is an explorer, a traveler, a man of adventure, or at least that's what he'd call himself. Others might just call him a colonialist with a gun and an attitude problem. The year is 1760. Jacobus sets out on a journey through Namaqua territory in southern Africa, accompanied by his cattle, horses, and slaves. He's armed with what he believes are the gifts of civilization: tobacco, copper, and arrogance. When he meets the Namaqua people, he tries to present these gifts, expecting admiration, gratitude, maybe even reverence. But the Namaqua's reaction is not what he hoped for. They don't seem impressed by his civilized offerings. To them, he's just another strange man with strange habits. Jacobus, of course, takes this personally. He sees them as barbarians and savages. And from that point on, the story becomes a study in dehumanization, how one man's prejudice blinds him so completely that he can no longer see others as people.
So uncivilized.
He threatens to shoot anyone who touches his wagon. He describes the people as if they were animals. Shut up. Yet, the irony is clear. It's he who becomes the savage. Because when he falls sick, the Namakwas actually care for him. They treat him, feed him, and help him recover. And how does he repay them? By insulting them, refusing to show gratitude, and eventually getting himself cast out of their community.
Get out of here!
He loses 5 of his 6 slaves in the process. And that, to him, is unforgivable. His wounded pride festers into vengeance. On the long, lonely journey home, accompanied only by his last slave, Clower, something remarkable happens. When Clower falls sick, Jacobus carries him on his back day after day through the wilderness. For a brief moment, there's something human there. Compassion, perhaps, but it doesn't last. Eventually, he abandons Clower to die alone, promising to return, but never does. And when Jacobus finally reaches home, he doesn't find peace. Instead, he plans his revenge. He returns to the Namakwa's land with a small army. What follows is a massacre. Men, women, children. He kills them all, or watches them die, with what he calls satisfaction. He even defines savagery in his own words.
A way of life based on disdain for the value of human life and sensual delight in the pain of others.
And in that chilling line, we see him for what he is, the very thing he despises.
Whoopsie daisy!
But Coetzee doesn't stop there. The book ends with an afterword and an appendix, written as though by colonial officials, praising Jacobus's courage and his expedition. They completely ignore his brutality. It's as if the massacre never happened. And that's the quiet horror of it all. History, as we know, has a way of silencing certain voices and glorifying others. Coetzee exposes that manipulation beautifully. The official record shows the hunter, not the hunted, the explorer, not the exterminator. It's a deliberate omission, a way of saying, these people don't matter. And that's exactly Coetzee's point. The book I'm talking about is Dusklands by J.M. Coetzee. Published in 1974, it's his debut novella, and even in this early work, you can already see the seeds of what would later make him one of the greatest writers of our time. Reading Dusklands felt like being dropped into 2 psychological laboratories, one testing the mind, the other testing morality. Both stories dissect power, control, and the frightening ease with which people justify cruelty. The first novelette, The Vietnam Project, strips away the glamour of war to reveal the psychological wreckage behind it. It's a brilliant examination of mental disintegration. Eugene Dawn is the perfect representation of the modern man. Intelligent, ambitious, but emotionally fragile, trapped in a system that rewards manipulation and punishes doubt. The second, the narrative of Jacobus Coetzee, is about colonial arrogance, how civilization can be used as an excuse for violence. It's dark, uncomfortable, but deeply revealing. Through Jacobus, Coetzee shows us that savagery isn't defined by the color of one's skin or the language one speaks. It's defined by one's heart, by the capacity for cruelty. The beauty of Coetzee's writing lies in his restraint. The prose is clean, almost clinical, yet the emotion lingers. The storytelling feels detached, but that's exactly what makes it powerful. He doesn't tell you what to feel. He makes you face it on your own. If there's one criticism I have, it's that the book feels short. The plots aren't tightly woven, and the climaxes don't explode. They simmer. It's a terse narrative, compact but dense. And maybe that's intentional. Coetzee doesn't waste words. He builds meaning in silence. Still, for such a short book, Dusklands leaves a long echo. It forces you to question not just the character's morality, but your own capacity for justification. How often do we overlook cruelty because it's been dressed up as duty or progress? This was my first time reading Coetzee, and honestly, I see why he won the Nobel Prize. He doesn't just write stories, he dissects humanity, and he does it without sentimentality. Reading Dusklands is like looking into a mirror you're afraid to stare at for too long. J.M. Coetzee is a South African-born writer, later a citizen of Australia, and winner of the Nobel Prize in Literature in 2003. His works often deal with morality, power, identity, and guilt, usually set against the backdrop of colonial and post-colonial South Africa. He's known for his sparse, precise prose and for never wasting a sentence. Books like Disgrace, Waiting for the Barbarians, and Life and Times of Michael K. cemented his reputation as one of literature's most unflinching moral voices. But even in this debut, Dusklands can already see the moral rigor and the quiet fury that define his later works. Dusklands isn't an easy read, but it's an important one. It's a mirror held up to human arrogance and hypocrisy. Whether it's the psychological war rooms of Vietnam or the colonial frontiers of Africa, Coetzee shows that cruelty wears many faces. It's short, yes, and not as tightly constructed as some of his later novels, but it stays with you. Because once you've seen what Coetzee exposes, you can't unsee it. So if you're looking for something different, something that challenges you, unsettles you, but also makes you think deeply, this one is worth your time. Until next time, happy reading. Hey, thanks so much for hanging out with me today. If you're interested in diving deeper into this book, I've left some links down in the description. You can use it to grab yourself a copy and keep the adventure going. And if you're in the mood for more great reads, don't go just yet. Click on one of the videos popping up right now that I think you'll love. And don't forget to give this review a like, leave a comment, or even subscribe if you'd like to see more. Every bit of support helps us grow this little community of book lovers. See you in the next one.